Most people think intelligence is loud, fast answers, strong opinions, constant talking. But what if the smartest person in the room is the one saying nothing? What if real intelligence doesn't try to impress you? It quietly observes you. Because the truth is, the more intelligent someone becomes, the less they feel the need to prove it. And once you understand why, you'll never look at people the same way again. Picture this. You're in a conversation, maybe at work, maybe with friends. Everyone is talking, debating, trying to sound smart. One person dominates the room. They speak confidently. They have answers for everything. People nod, impressed, and naturally, you assume they must be the smartest one here. But then there's someone else, quiet, observing, not rushing to speak, almost invisible in the background. At first, they don't stand out. But if you pay attention, something feels different. When they finally speak, the entire room shifts. Because what they say isn't loud, it's precise. Not frequent, but impactful, and that's when you start to realize intelligence doesn't always look the way you were taught. In this video, we'll uncover 8 subtle psychological patterns that reveal who is truly intelligent, even when no one notices. 1. They ask simple questions. Others avoid. Highly intelligent people don't try to sound complex. They try to understand what's real. Psychologically, this comes from deep cognitive clarity. Their brain is not impressed by complicated language or fast thinking. Instead, it constantly searches for weak assumptions. That's why, in the middle of a smart discussion, they might ask something surprisingly simple. Why are we assuming this is true? And suddenly, everything stops. Because most people build ideas on top of unverified beliefs. They rush forward without questioning the base. But intelligent minds slow down exactly at that moment. They don't add more ideas. They test the foundation. For example, in a business meeting, everyone may agree on a strategy. Charts look good. Numbers make sense. But one quiet person asks, what if the data itself is flawed? That one question can save months of failure. Because real intelligence isn't about having more answers. It's about questioning what everyone else ignores. Sometimes the simplest question reveals the biggest flaw. 2. They are comfortable saying, I don't know. Here is something most people don't realize. Confidence and intelligence are not the same thing. In fact, people with shallow knowledge often appear more confident because to them, everything feels simple. But highly intelligent people see complexity everywhere. Psychologically, this is called awareness of uncertainty. The more you understand, the more you realize how much you don't know. That's why intelligent people often say, I'm not sure. Not because they lack knowledge, but because they respect truth more than ego. For example, ask 2 people a difficult question. One gives you a quick, confident answer. The other pauses and says, there are multiple possibilities here. Most people will trust the first person, but the second one is thinking deeper. Because they are not trying to impress you. They are trying to be accurate, and that changes everything. True intelligence is not afraid of uncertainty. It is built on it. 3. They pause before they speak. This is where things get interesting. Have you ever noticed someone who takes a few seconds before answering? Not confused, not distracted, just thinking. That pause is not hesitation, it's processing. Highly intelligent people run mental simulations before speaking. Their brain doesn't react instantly. It evaluates possibilities. If I say this, what happens next? Is there a better way to explain this? What am I missing? While others respond to the surface, they analyze the depth. For example, in a disagreement, most people react emotionally. They defend their position immediately, but an intelligent person pauses. They consider both sides. They choose words carefully. Because they understand, words don't just express thoughts. They create consequences. That's why they may seem slower in conversation, but in reality, they're not slower. They're just thinking further ahead than everyone else. 4. They observe more than they speak. Most people talk to be heard. Intelligent people listen to understand. Psychologically, this comes from high pattern recognition. Their brain is not only focused on words, but behavior. Who interrupts whom, who gets defensive, who changes opinions to fit the group. While others focus on speaking, they are quietly collecting data. For example, in a group discussion, one person may talk the most, but the quiet observer notices something deeper: who influences the group and why. It's like watching a chessboard. Every move matters, and the longer they observe, the clearer the entire structure becomes. But here's the problem. To others, this looks like silence, like disinterest, when in reality, they are learning more by watching than most people learn by talking. 5. They instantly notice contradictions. But the truth is even deeper. Highly intelligent minds cannot ignore inconsistency. Psychologically, their brain constantly compares information. Every new idea is tested against existing knowledge. That's why contradictions stand out immediately. For example, someone says, "Hard work guarantees success." Most people accept it. But an analytical mind asks, what about people who worked hard and still failed? Not to argue, but to understand reality more accurately. Their mind looks for exceptions, patterns, gaps, because contradictions are not just mistakes. They are signals. Signals that something is incomplete. And once they notice it, they can't unsee it. This makes them appear critical at times. But it's not negativity, it's precision. It's because intelligence doesn't accept ideas easily, it tests them relentlessly. 6. They change their mind without ego. This is where most people struggle. We are taught to defend our opinions, to stay consistent, to be right. But intelligent people see beliefs differently. To them, a belief is not identity. It's a temporary conclusion. Psychologically, this is called cognitive flexibility. When new evidence appears, they update their thinking, quietly, naturally. For example, during a debate, most people double down when challenged. But an intelligent person might say, "That's a good point. I hadn't considered that." To some, it looks like weakness, but in reality, it takes far more intelligence to change your mind than to defend a wrong idea, because their goal is not to win, it's to get closer to truth, and truth doesn't care about your ego. 7. They resist group thinking. Here is something most people feel, but rarely question. When everyone agrees, it feels safe to agree too. This is called groupthink, and it controls more decisions than we realize. But intelligent people create mental distance. They ask themselves, do I believe this? Or am I just following others? For example, in a meeting, everyone supports one idea, but one person feels something is off. They don't immediately speak, they analyze, and sometimes they disagree, not to stand out, but because something doesn't align. This can make them look difficult. But history shows something powerful. Most breakthroughs came from people who questioned what everyone else accepted, because following the crowd feels comfortable. but thinking independently creates truth. 8. They don't need to prove they're smart. This is the most overlooked sign of intelligence. The less someone needs to prove it, the more likely it's real. Psychologically, this comes from internal validation. They don't depend on others to confirm their intelligence, so they don't perform it. They don't dominate conversations. They don't argue unnecessarily. They don't try to win every discussion because they are not driven by insecurity. For example, someone might challenge them publicly. Instead of reacting emotionally, they stay calm. They respond only if it adds value, or sometimes they don't respond at all because they understand something powerful. Not every conversation deserves energy, and not every opinion deserves a response. True intelligence is quiet because it doesn't need attention to exist. At a deeper level, intelligence is not just about thinking. It's about awareness. Awareness of what you know, what you don't know, and what might be missing. Most people operate on surface-level thinking, quick reactions, immediate judgments, but intelligent minds operate differently. They slow down, they question, they observe patterns others ignore, and that creates a completely different way of seeing the world. Now think about your own life. How many times did you mistake confidence for intelligence? How many times did you overlook the quiet person because they didn't try to stand out? Maybe the smartest person you've ever met was someone you barely noticed. And maybe there were moments when you stayed silent, not because you had nothing to say, but because you were thinking deeper than everyone else. In a world that rewards noise, real intelligence becomes invisible. It doesn't shout. It doesn't compete. It doesn't demand attention. It simply observes, understands, and speaks when it matters. So, next time you're in a room full of voices, don't just listen to who is speaking the most. Pay attention to who is thinking the most, because the loudest mind is rarely the sharpest, and the quietest one might just be the one seeing everything.